Three playoff coaches are getting fired when their seasons are over. Let me tell you who they are and what it tells us about the organizations making those decisions. Cleveland was at the top of the hill, ready to make a title run, and has made moves that took them backwards. Orlando was on the upswing and still is, to be fair, but they gave up a lot to make a lateral move, and it's going to take them some time to recover from that. And Minnesota, still climbing up that hill, right where they're supposed to be, and they're about to make a move that puts them over the top. Let's start with Cleveland. Cleveland had a great thing going. Remember a few years ago when they traded for Donovan Mitchell, and people looked at that roster and said, is there a better group of 20-somethings that you would want on your team? Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Darius Garland. Evan Mobley was looking like our next great generational big. They brought in Donovan Mitchell. Things were looking excellent. Why did they have such a long runway? Because of Evan Mobley. Your team's runway is tied to the development of your best player, which Evan Mobley is. I know Donovan Mitchell is considered the best player right now because he is literally a better player than Evan Mobley. But when I say best player, I mean the guy you're building around, your North Star. You brought in Mitchell to supplement Mobley. And in the last few years, that dynamic has flipped. They've been acting like their best player is Donovan Mitchell, and it's making Evan Mobley worse. You hear NBA analysts talk about Evan Mobley, that he's plateaued or that he's fallen off. They're not looking at the real problem here, and it has to do with the roster construction around Evan Mobley and the emphasis that is no longer being placed on him. Last year on one of my trade prediction episodes, I called for them to ship Jared Allen out of town so that they could play Mobley at the center more often. Jared Allen's contract was going to balloon, not a $30 million center. You can't afford him on this team with Mobley and Mitchell making the money they do, in addition to Garland. But what did they do instead? They trade their 26-year-old point guard in Darius Garland for a 36-year-old point guard in James Harden. That one move tells you all you need to know about Cleveland's mindset right now. This looks a lot like the move a desperate team makes when they are putting pressure on their coaches and players to win deep in the playoffs right now, or else. And that's what they went out and got Harden for, because they want to make that push now. Harden is a better player than Darius Garland, and so we're going to get him to try to go as deep in the playoffs as we can because we are putting that mandate on this team. And why are they doing that? Because they're appeasing Donovan Mitchell. They have already gotten into the mode of let's do everything we can to convince him to stay here. He re-signed not too long ago, but everybody has known since he got there that he's had his eyes potentially elsewhere. And he's been a bit of a flight risk ever since being there. And it's made Cleveland operate in a certain way. You cannot operate under the mandate to appease your best player. You do not want to be in that situation. They were much better off considering Mobley their best player. And they could have traded Mitchell when giant superstar trades were getting massive hauls. Now, hindsight's 2020, they didn't do that. But they still have an opportunity to reorient around Mobley. And how do you do that? By taking the pressure off of this team to win the championship right now. Mobley's only, 24, 25? You have a long way to go with him, and I'm predicting them to lose to Toronto. This is not a good defensive team. The Raptors have a lot of guys who can score. I think they're going to lose, and I think they're going to see that as such an unacceptable outcome that they're going to fire Kenny Atkinson. Now, what we should be asking ourselves is, why does Cleveland think that a first-round loss is an unacceptable outcome when they have not won a second-round series since LeBron's Cavs? Watch what they do with Harden this summer. That's going to determine for sure where their head's at. If they cut him, that's an organization buying itself some breathing room and understanding that we're not going to put this mandate on the team that we expect a championship right away, despite not winning a second-round series. Let's rattle off some predictions when it comes to the Cavs. I think they are going to lose in the first round. Fire Kenny Atkinson, give James Harden a 3-year deal at a lower annual number than what they were paying Garland, so they can justify it as we got some tax savings for a better player, despite him being almost 40. I think that LeBron is going to sign there for whatever they can work out. Whether it involves them dumping Jared Allen on some other team, we'll see. I think that's something to look out for, similar to how the Celtics dumped Porzingis and got his money off their books pretty easily. I could see Cleveland doing something like that with Jared Allen's money. But otherwise, I think it's in the cards for LeBron to sign there for whatever he has to. And then I think they go hire Frank Vogel, won a championship in LA with LeBron, has had plenty of deep playoff runs. So he has the championship experience, the familiarity. He's a defensive-minded coach. And the move that would be the height of desperation would be trading Mobley for Giannis. Each of those moves paints a picture of a team desperate to win a championship as soon as possible, taking them further and further away from that high upside group of 20-somethings we saw just a few years ago. This team is going to look like the Phoenix Suns from the last couple of seasons with Durant, Beal, and Booker pretty soon. This is what organizational desperation looks like happening in slow motion. Let's talk about Orlando. Jamahl Mosley is definitely going to get fired. And it's the right move, but for the wrong reason. Some coaches are good at taking a bad team and making them a playoff team. And that's what Jamahl Mosley is. Gives your team some structure, gets them playing together, gets them playing hard. Coming out of the lottery stage where you were gathering assets, you become a play-in team, maybe you make the first round, but that's about their ceiling. They take you from being bad to a playoff team, and that's the wall they're up against right now. Getting to the next level is going to take a different coach. Every team experiences it, and I believe that they're going to hire Tom Thibodeau. He makes a lot of sense with the roster. Thibodeau's teams tend to have a ball-centric offensive player. Orlando's going to do that with Paolo Banchero, and they're going to focus on being a great defensive team like they've been in years past. It's fallen off this season, and it just makes too much sense to me not to happen. But independent of all that, the organization is going to see the result of their postseason run here, which they're either going to lose in the play-in game or they're going to get swept in the first round. They're going to see that as unacceptable because of the extreme move they made to acquire Desmond Bane. Acquiring Bane was going to take an offense that was down around the bottom of the league in the last several seasons, and one guy was going to make that team a respectable offensive team and vault them into contender status. Orlando's front office gave this team an inflated set of expectations that they had no business giving them. And that inability to accurately assess themselves is a major red flag when it comes to this front office, and something that they need to take a step back and assess before they decide to make an additional move to take another big step forward, rather than slow playing this and letting the growth happen organically with a experienced coach like Tom Thibodeau. What Orlando needs right now, after what's going to be another disappointing playoff exit, is patience. Get some picks back, let your young guys grow a little bit, maybe make a shrewd free agent signing or two, get back in the draft, get your trade assets back. No more big moves for the next couple of seasons. You need to try to be competitive in the first round. Don't put the expectation on this team to be a second round or further team yet. You have no reason to believe that that's realistic. They have a good roster. They just need to stop being in such a hurry. And another desperate move is going to put them on that Milwaukee, Cleveland desperation track, which is a far cry from how this team looked just a year ago, which was on the upswing and ready to take that next step. They took way too big of a swing to make a lateral move. It's not going to kill them. They need to take a step back, be a little patient, and get back to the basics. And finally, another coach that's going to get fired. Minnesota's Chris Finch, which is sad because I like Chris Finch. And Minnesota's not going to fire him because of some perceived failure to meet expectations. Minnesota is not that kind of organization that says you make it to the conference finals or you're getting fired. They already know going into this playoffs that Chris Finch is getting fired, short of winning a championship, because it's just that time in the team's development to make that move. I mentioned it with Jamahl Mosley, that coaches are designed for certain stages of growth. Chris Finch is a guy who takes your team from a playoff team to a deep in the playoffs team, a contender. We've seen that happen under his tutelage with the Timberwolves, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. He deserves another job from a team looking to have that legitimacy. But here's the reason why he has to go. This roster is capped out, it's light on assets, and so their only upward trajectory comes from internal development. Chris Finch has not developed the young players on his roster. The biggest flaw on this roster is the lack of a consistent number 2 option. They got Julius Randle to be a stopgap in that regard, which Julius Randle is an excellent number 2 option. Consistency is not a strength of his, though. They did that because they were expecting McDaniels and Naz Reid to step up in that department and be a reliable number 2 and number 3 scoring option. But as far as I can see, neither of those two players has gotten any better over the last couple of seasons. And that's Chris Finch's fault. This team takes a step forward when those two guys take steps forward. They already know that they're going to be looking to move Randall elsewhere once Reid is ready. They're going to be looking to move Gobert elsewhere or move him to the bench once Behringer can be their starting center. Or maybe they go Randall and Reid. I don't know. But that is their next move to clear cap space. That's when they need the development of Naz Reid, Behringer to really kick in. They're designed for their trio to be Edwards, McDaniels, Reid. That was the plan. That was part of the logic for why they traded Karl-Anthony Towns. And beyond those two guys, I mentioned Behringer. Terrence Shannon Jr. hasn't gotten much better. We saw what happened with Rob Dillingham. He may have been a bust. We won't know until he's on another team or two. But he sure as hell didn't develop. That's the troubling trend with this team, internal development. And that's the only area this team can lean on to improve. So Chris Finch has to go. And they're going to promote Micah Nori. They value continuity. He's been interviewed for head coaching positions that have opened up the last year or two. He knows these players well. I think he's the right guy for the job. It actually looks a lot like what Denver did by promoting David Adelman. They fired Mike Malone. One of the big reasons for that was the lack of development of young players. They bring in David Adelman. He has a great first playoff run. And then this year, we saw a lot more out of the young players on their team. Micah Nori preserves the culture. His mandate is going to be clear. Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels need to develop into 20-plus point scorers. Get this team ready to move off of Randall's salary and get this team ready for when Gobert's salary is going to decrease and he potentially starts coming off the bench. They need internal development to prepare for that next phase of the team in order to continue to keep Anthony Edwards at his current stature, which is a deep playoff run almost every year. And as long as Minnesota keeps doing what they're doing, Minnesota is going to continue to be in the mix. And you could tell that Anthony Edwards is happy. If we ever hear any whispers about Minnesota needs to do something to win a title, Anthony Edwards isn't happy. I don't think he sees it that way. He sees it as this team, this organization is putting me in the mix. I've got my guys with me, and I'm going to go out there and beat my opponent. I don't think that this whole superstar wants the organization to do more to get them a title story is going to apply here when it comes to Anthony Edwards. And unfortunately for Minnesota, they just got an unlucky draw with Denver. If only they could have gotten Houston or LA in the first round. Despite their health issues coming into the playoffs, they would have handled both of those teams fairly easily. They could have coasted a little bit against one of those teams, nursed guys like Edwards and McDaniels, and to a lesser extent Reid, back to health, and gotten the team healthier for a second-round matchup against San Antonio. But instead, they're going to go up against a juggernaut immediately with their best players hobbled. I just don't see it for them. So even though they're going to lose in the first round, and they made the conference finals the last couple of seasons, don't buy any of the noise that says that this is a major disappointment of a year and that Chris Finch is getting fired because they didn't beat Denver in the first round. That is not what's happening. Chris Finch is getting fired because he's reached his ceiling with this team. This year is not a disappointment for them. I mean, it is because they had the capability to make a finals run if they weren't unhealthy and if they got a more friendly first-round matchup. So in that sense, it's disappointing. But the organization knows that that part's not Chris Finch's fault, and that's not why he's going to be let go. This is just part of Minnesota's growth plan, and Micah Nori is the next guy up. Speaking of Denver, Denver's going to win the championship this season. In the East, Boston is going to make the championship. I mentioned that in my last episode. An extremely stable organization that has consistently made smart moves. Both Denver and Boston are a picture of stability. They've succeeded because they don't overreact to playoff losses. Denver saw a coaching problem and promoted from within. No panic, no outside hire, continuity preserved. Boston saw a cap problem with two of their declining starters. They moved off of those expensive contracts and started giving more time to some of their young players who've been playing excellent, while giving up no future assets in those trades. No appeasing to a superstar, no big swings, no desperate moves, no get to the conference finals or you're fired. Two organizations that trust their own process and are executing a plan with patience to let growth compound over time.